What's up, everybody? I'm Clayton. Welcome to the first episode of AOS new series, Fans of Films, where I sit down, talk with different people about movies they love, movies they hate, and everything in between. It's an honor to have my first guest be a very good friend of mine, someone that we've had on the channel before. Actually, we reviewed The Shining together. You can go check out that review in the archive somewhere. Uh, Bryan LOMAX, everybody, person who I think is probably the best movie reviewer on YouTube. If you haven't checked out his channel, go do so. Give him a sub, give him a thumbs up. He's laughing. He's gonna be modest about it and humble about it, but he's the man. Bryan, how's it going? Thanks for being here, buddy.
Thanks. Yeah, it's going well. It's going well. The world is as bent out of shape as ever, but we've still got films to keep us
We
going.
do, we do. We have, thank God for movies, right? Thank God for movies.
Yeah, tends to be older movies at the moment, though.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Seriously. Well, Bryan, I'm excited for this, man. It's this first episode in the series I'm trying out. I want to just kind of pick your brains about different movies, ask you some questions, and we'll just kind of have fun with this. But I want to start off. I'm gonna just come right out and ask. I already know the answer to this because I know you, but some of the viewers may not be super familiar with you. What is your favorite movie of all time?
The Dark Knight. Yeah, I can draw you a map actually of the different ages in my life and what my favorite films were at various
Really?
points. Yeah,
That's
yeah.
pretty cool.
Yeah, yeah. So the my first favorite movie, like the first time I reached a point in my life where I could assuredly say that's my favorite movie, was Critters.
I thought you were gonna say Halloween, but I was hoping.
So I saw Chris. So we got a VCR in, it would have been 1988. So it was 2 years after Ghostbusters at the cinema, because that was the first film we ever rented on video. So I would have been 8 years old around that time, and when we got our VCR and started renting movies, my mum and dad also gave each of us, me and my two brothers, a tape each. We had a 2-hour cassette tape each.
Old school.
Yeah, it was like 3 hours if you did it in 4 hours if you did it in long play, if you recorded in long play. But that meant that it wore down a lot faster if you did it in long play, not short play. Man alive, that shows my age. But yeah, so they gave us a cassette each, which meant we could take whatever we wanted off the TV and then watch it whenever. And one of the first films I taped for myself off TV was Critters. So I would have been either a late 8-year-old or early 9-year-old.
Okay.
Taped Critters off TV and instantly fell in love with it. And that was around the point that I realised just how kind of nutty about movies that I was. And then having that ability to tape them off TV was like, yeah. But then after that, 11 years old, Tim Burton's Batman became my favourite film. In between that and Critters, Highlander actually became a favourite for a very short period of time. Very, very short period of time. And then obviously Batman Returns, just like 8 months after seeing Batman, it was like it was always a tug of war. It was always a tug of war between Batman and Batman Returns as to what was my favourite. Yeah. It was a few years after that I saw True Romance. And that's when I was like, oh, you know what? I think
that one topped it.
I think True Romance might actually be my favourite film. It might actually just knocked Batman Returns off the number one spot. And then it was quite a while after that that Fight Club then knocked True Romance off the number one spot. And very shortly after Fight Club, Magnolia knocked Fight Club off the number one spot. And then it was quite a while after that. Truman Show was kind of vying for first position
Right.
along with Magnolia. And then I saw opening night. Well, it wasn't opening night, actually. It was 2 weeks before opening night because it was a staff screening. I saw The Dark Knight, and it was the single greatest experience I'd had in a cinema showing.
So good.
Just like it was on IMAX, staff screening. Everyone was talking during the trailers and the ads, and I was getting really nervous. As soon as that film started,
Yeah.
nothing.
You're good.
Except laughing when it was appropriate to do so. So like the Joker's pencil trick, all the beats that you would expect people to laugh at, they did.
Right.
It was just like, yeah, the best experience I've ever had with an audience watching a film, and just the fact that it was a Batman movie and the fact that it was the best Batman movie ever made in my eyes, was just and nothing's knocked it off the number one spot since.
So I know you said Magnolia had it for a while. Did Batman Begins top that, or was it Magnolia till The Dark Knight?
It was one of them situations where it was like, if you ask me my favorite, I'm going to say Batman Begins. But if you ask me what's the best,
right,
I was going to say Magnolia. And to a large degree, I think that would still stand, because I think you always have to acknowledge, when people say like, what's the best film of all time?
Right.
That's a loaded question, because I think most people will answer that, and what they're actually saying is what their favorite film of all time is. But there's a big difference between saying what the best film is of all time and what your favorite film is of all time. It just so happens The Dark Knight for me covers both bases. I do think it's the best film of all time. I mean, I'm being a little facetious there.
No,
it's like, it's like I can look at The Dark Knight and there are certain faults I can see in it where I'm like, I'm not oblivious. I'm not an idiot. But it's just like the enjoyment I get from that far outweighs any need to delve into those faults. That it's just but yeah. So like for me, on a technical level, Magnolia is still one of the greatest movies ever made, as far as I'm concerned. Like if I could write something ever as good as Magnolia, that'd be it.
You're done.
I'm done. There's nowhere I can go from here. I'd walk away. It's like I could never write anything better than that. So there is that constant again tug of war between what's the best and what's your favorite. There's the two different things.
No, that's awesome, man. I didn't know you could track. That's pretty cool that you could track your favorites. I don't know that I could do that. I think for me, The Dark Knight was my favorite film for 14 years, from 2008 until 2022. Before that, I don't know that I would have had a favorite. I think if you had asked me, I probably would have said something like Terminator 2, Halloween, or Jaws, or something like that. But The Dark Knight was the first definitive, this is my favorite movie of all time. And I didn't think it would ever be topped until another Batman movie came along. So that's cool. Favorite movie, The Dark Knight. And if I ask why, it would be more of just that initial experience that you had with it was just at such a high that nothing else has reached that for you. That kind of, and obviously Batman fandom, which I share with you, but is it the combination of this is a character that I love and an experience that was tops everything else?
Yeah, it's like I'm not a big nostalgia guy. I've never been much of a nostalgia guy. Like I revisited the Monster Squad just out of sheer nostalgia, because as a kid, absolutely loved it. I watched it as an adult, and I'm like, man, that film it's a turd. Why do people still bang on about this? And I feel like so many people are still living in nostalgia with something like the Monster Squad. Yeah. But like I say, Gremlins, the same. Loved it as a kid, watched it as an adult, and it's like, you know what? I'll stick with Critters, thanks. nostalgia very rarely gets me. It really does. I'm not saying it never gets me, but it's very, very rare that nostalgia gets. I'm just not. It's not really a thing for me. So it's like we've had this conversation before, and I've done a very short video of it on my channel about the criteria I have for measuring a 5-star movie. And The Dark Knight, for a start, it fulfills those 3 criteria. And that's the rewatchability factor, the fact that it is a technically very well made movie. So it's just all of those things factored into as you say, the fact that I am a Batman fan. The fact that the 90s for me was it was just Batman and the X-Files sums up the 90s for me, because I didn't fit in at school, didn't have a good time at school, and thankfully I had a really good home life. So when I came home, that's it. I was quite happy to shut the door on the world outside and just sit there in my bedroom watching movies. So most of my education came through movies. But like I say, big part of the 90s was X-Files and Batman the Animated Series. And a lot of the comic books that Batman the Animated Series drew on were the comic books that I'd kind of gravitate towards. So you're talking like late 70s era, right through the 80s and early 90s. So that whole era was kind of my era. I'm not one of these guys who says, that's a faithful adaptation of Batman. No, it's not. It's a faithful adaptation of a particular era of Batman. So, people who say, Ben Affleck's Batman kills. Well, all right, that was Bob Kane's original Batman right there. So,
I have a compendium, volume 1 of like the Golden Age Batman comics, where it's like the first 50 Batman comics ever written. There's at least a dozen of those I could pull up and show where Batman kills people. It's like, what are you talking about?
And his blasé attitude towards it as well. Like he literally like lets someone plummet to the death from a blimp.
Yes.
And he just delivers this line where it's like, oh, it's probably better off anyway.
He kicks the guy. He breaks the guy's neck, kicking him through a window. It's like, dude. Is he just flipping about it? It's like, don't come at me with the Batman doesn't kill. There's been so many different versions of the character from the Golden Age, Silver Age, Bronze Age. I don't get into that kind of stuff.
It's perfectly fine for someone to say the version of Batman that I love most doesn't kill.
Correct.
If someone says I don't like the Ben Affleck Batman because the version of Batman I like is the one that doesn't kill, I'm like, well done to you, mate. But if someone turns around and says, Ben Affleck's Batman is not faithful to the character because Batman doesn't kill, I'm calling BS on that. I'm sorry. It's like, it's just nonsense. So yeah, I am of the school that I prefer the Batman who doesn't kill. And that's why I prefer the Christian Bale iteration. And I also really love the Patterson iteration because they're trying to go the route of, look, Batman does some pretty dark stuff. He will break some bones. He will put you in hospital, but he's going to do his damnedest to make sure he doesn't kill you. That's the version I like, but that is not the only version of Batman. So
dude. Look, Bryan and I could have a whole episode of just Batman. We could fanboy out and talk Batman for an entire episode. But getting some more questions here. One question I wanted to ask to kind of take it back to your early years. Do you remember the first movie that you saw in theaters, and what was it?
Never Ending Story.
Never Ending Story. Wow. Yeah. Okay.
I was 4 years old. My mum took me and my brothers. I think this may have been. I don't think my dad was out of work at that point. There was a rough spot when I was a kid when my dad's workplace they had a cave-in on the roof, and my dad got an injury, and the place had to kind of close down and stuff. My dad was just basically
Yeah.
unemployed for a while. And because it was Thatcher's Britain, everything was turned to crap, so he couldn't get a job for ages. But yeah, I remember, I think that may have come just slightly after, but for some reason it's kind of blended in. You know what memories are
Gotcha.
like. Memories
Right.
not very trustworthy,
Yeah.
but yeah, certainly the first film that I was taken to see at the cinema was Never Ending Story.
Wow.
Um,
Do you remember the first movie that you, as an adult or maybe late teenager after you got your first job, what the first movie you went out and bought was that you actually bought?
yes,
What was that?
it was the first two Batman films.
Oh, awesome.
The Tim
Awesome.
Burton films. Yeah, so like I say, before I bought movies on VHS, I just recorded them off TV.
Yeah.
So Critters was one, Highlander was one, and Terminator was one.
Mm.
And those three films were on constant rotation.
Yeah.
Like basically, like Terminator at one point during that, you know,
Right.
the Critters to Batman phase. Terminator was one of the favorites, was in there at one point. So and still is to this day. But
Yeah.
yeah, so I recorded all them, and then when it was like, oh, I now have money to spend, I'm
Yeah.
gonna buy some films. Literally could not wait to, even though I had it recorded off TV, could not wait to own an actual copy of the
Right.
VHS of both Batman and Batman Returns.
That's
Yeah,
awesome.
yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. Do you still, I know at one point you had a pretty sick collection of Blu-rays and physical media. Do you still collect movies now, or have you got to the point where you're like, you know what, I've collected my share. Now I'm just a streaming guy and I just, stream stuff now.
So my pattern right now is because I did a video where for me it's the hoarding aspect of it
Mhm.
that it does something to my mental state that
Uh,
I'm not happy with, where it kind of consumes your life. And when I feel like I have to have them on display, all in the cases, that's when it gets into that's when it gets to the point where I'm like, I don't want to do this.
right.
So what I started doing is I buy the black canvasy kind of cases you can get that hold
Yep.
like 100 discs.
Yep.
So what I do is I never buy movies new these days. I get
Okay.
them. I tend to get them from charity shops on DVD. It's cheap as chips. You can usually pick up like 5 DVDs for £1 in a charity shop.
Oh, wow.
So I can get like movies that aren't really that old that came out last year in a charity shop, 5 for £1 on DVD. And what I tend to do is I'll buy ones that I haven't seen but wanted to get around to seeing. I'll take them out of the cases, throw the cases in the artwork, put the disc in the bag. It's on the shelf. If I want to watch it, it's there. I've got it logged on so I have a list on Letterboxd that
Yeah.
tells me what I own. So I know I can look at the list on Letterboxd. Do I actually have that? Yes, I do. If I want to watch it, I can go get it out the bag. Boom.
Right.
And see it. But it's just that cuts through this whole. I'm not turning and then seeing this mountain of
Right.
things
That's
that.
a good idea.
Yeah, because you get in this headspace where, like, I don't know about you, but like when my shelves were full,
Yeah.
I could spend 2 hours procrastinating over which movie I'm going to watch, and then never actually watch it. And
Never.
by the time I've pulled one off the shelf, I'm like, well, I've just, to put it bluntly,
Watch the full movie.
yeah, I've just pissed away 2 hours of my life trying to decide
Yeah.
what to watch, and now I don't actually have the time to watch it because I've got to go to bed.
Yeah.
So it cuts through all that by getting rid of the artwork, getting rid of the cases, just having the discs, and then
Yeah.
I'm like, if I've got some spare time, I might flick through my list on Letterboxd and go, oh, I forgot I had that film, and then I can actively look for that film from my bags, bang,
Right.
bang it on, and I feel it clears my head. It makes
Yeah.
things a lot cleaner, yeah.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I don't have, so I had a lot of DVDs when DVDs were a thing. Sold a lot of them because they were taking up too much space. I've started to kind of move over to Blu-rays now, but Blu-rays are also more expensive than DVDs. So I've gotten to the point now where I'm like, if I don't have something and I want to watch it, I'll just find it on YouTube or some streaming service and watch it there. But yeah, I hear what you're saying because I'm a collector in a sense. Like I have to have certain things that I know I don't need to have. I don't need to spend the money on it. But in my brain, I'm like, you need this. You
Yeah,
it comes out a lot with Batman stuff.
yeah,
Like I'll see something. Someone will send me something really cool, Batman something. I'm like, I'm getting that. I don't care how much it costs. I'm getting that. I need that.
yeah,
But then I'll get like ready. I'll put in the my information and everything. And I'll have this moment of you know Clayton, do you really need to spend this money to get to purchase this thing? Look at all the Batman stuff that you have. Do you really need this? And I'm like, no. And it's like a struggle, man, because I'm like,
oh,
I really want it, but I know I don't need it. So yeah, that I like your call there of keeping things on Letterbox. I should do that too. And then just keeping it out of sight where you have it if you need to
mm,
watch it, but you're not
mm,
looking at it to have that
yeah,
temptation of having to collect it or whatever.
mm.
So
It
yeah,
becomes the golden calf. You know what I mean? You end up.
yeah,
It's like you
yeah,
have this case is towering over, and it's almost like this idol worship. And I'm just like, I don't like being in that headspace anymore. It's just, and I think part of that comes with age and
mm,
various life experiences. Like I've been to Zambia a couple of times doing
oh wow,
like work over there, and when you see how little people have over there, and
yeah,
yet how happy they can be because their life isn't cluttered, that
right,
that's that changed me a bit. I've got to admit, and I think that's when I
mm,
started to have this rewiring in the brain of what, I've got to change things. I need to get rid
right,
of more stuff, not bring more stuff in. And when you think about it, half it it's just bits of plastic,
yeah,
bits of plastic crap. And it's just like
right,
I could feed a homeless guy with what
yeah,
it costs for
yeah,
that figure that's on my
mm,
So yeah, it's.
yeah. Well,
And
that's kind of,
I think having kids as well helps with that because
oh right, right,
as when you get kids and they start bringing stuff in and your space gets smaller, in the end you
yeah,
get to a point where you're just like, you know what, I gotta let
yeah,
this go because either I'm going to strangle my kids because they take
right,
up my space, or I've just got to chill and say, you know what, it's their
yeah,
time now. And that's like,
right,
but
yeah.
yeah,
That's one blessing about having kids, right? Forces you to be less selfish, yeah, that's cool. What is a certain movie? I'm gonna ask this both ways. What's a certain movie that you went into having really high expectations? The bar was set really high, and you're like, I'm gonna love this movie. You came out of it, and you're like, yeah, that was not very good. And then on the reverse side, a movie that had really low expectations, you didn't think you were going to like it, and you came out really loving it. Do you have an example of that?
um, like I always find that a hard question to answer, but I think,
Or maybe not initially, but is there one that
yeah,
like
yeah.
at
I think
first you loved it and then it came down? Or
there's certainly been. I mean, I look at the direct. The main reason I have high expectations for a film is usually because of the director. So I can
mm,
think of multiple times where whoever my favorite director was at that time has kind of let me down. Like
mm,
in the 90s. So when my passion for film was first like emerging, and as I say, Batman became my favorite film, followed by Batman Returns. As a result of that, Tim Burton became my favorite director as a 12-year-old. And I lapped up, Edward Scissorhands for me is an absolute classic as well. I loved
mm,
Beetlejuice. Ed Wood was a great film. So like Burton had this real streak in the early, late 80s to mid 90s where it's like, dude, this guy's like really cooking. So trailer for Mars Attacks came out, and I thought, man, this is just going to be awesome. It looks funny. It's going to be Burton on, just like letting himself go, just like
Big
letting
cast
rip.
too. I mean,
Yeah,
Nicholson and
like
okay.
mega cast. Like that was, it was like Burton in his prime. You know, it's just had back to back great films, and then Mars Attacks was just like, oh. Okay.
What happened here?
Yeah. So there's that. You know, there's been a like Paul Thomas Anderson for me. I've only seen it once, but like again, you've got Paul Thomas Anderson who's like I said, like Boogie Nights, such a great script, but then he writes something like Magnolia, which, as I've said, if I'd written Magnolia, I'd be like,
Right.
I'm done. But then he comes out with There Will Be Blood, and I'm like, dude, like,
So
this guy's just like next level.
yeah.
So when he did Inherent Vice,
Yeah.
I was really let down by that one.
Yeah.
I just felt like it was. I think maybe I've got to revisit it at some point. I've only seen it the once, but for me, as a fan of everything that Anderson had done up till that point, I was just
Right.
like, oh, this is.
Yeah, and that's weird because it's got great talent. You watch it. I mean, it's Paul Thomas Anderson, Joaquin Phoenix as he turns in a great performance. You know, yeah, Reese Witherspoon. I mean, the talent is all there. It's just, you know, like that old adage, lost in translation. Like, I don't know if there's just something between what he had up here and then how it came out, or like what happened with that one. Because I saw it too, and I kind of had the same feeling. Like, I was expecting with the names here and the talent to be something more, just wasn't. You know,
It's the trailer as well. Like the trailer had me because it just felt like I saw that trailer and knowing who Anderson was as a director, knowing his work, loving his work, and seeing that trailer. The trailer was really funny.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
was like,
Well,
it's just like this is going to be like Coen Brothers meets
Right,
Tarantino with a bit of There Will Be Blood. This is going to be awesome. I'm going to love this. And it was just flat. I was bored for much of it. I didn't find it as funny as I was hoping to. Some of the characters I just flat out didn't like.
Right.
And I was just like, I was just left scratching my head with that one. Going back to Tim Burton to flip that question in reverse, as you said.
Yeah.
I watched Big Fish at the cinema.
Ooh,
It was in a packed cinema, and I felt a bit flat watching it. Wasn't into it. I was like, I was a bit disappointed with that. Visually, it looks nice, but I didn't really feel anything.
yeah.
But because I was still a Burton fan at that point, you know, I still would have rated him as one of my favourites back when that came out. I picked up the film regardless when it came out on video and watched it again. But when I watched it at home in a more intimate setting, just me and the film,
Yeah.
I actually got emotional. I get to the end with all the stuff with the father and that, and
Right.
like I felt myself tearing up, and I'm like, why didn't I feel this in the cinema? Why didn't I feel this when I was sat with a packed audience watching it in the theatre? And so I just think, films can hit you in different ways depending on all manner of things. But
Right. Yeah, and that's what like is it's a why it's a good reason to watch a movie multiple times, at least more than once, because it could have just been I've had it happen with me where I watched a movie and just the mood I was in, I just didn't care for it, and then I come back to it eventually years down the road. I watch it again, I'm like, what did I miss that first time? Dude, that was actually really good, you know. And then there's been some movies where I liked it initially, and then as I watch it over the years, it just doesn't hold up. It doesn't have that same value,
just
you know.
trails off.
But yeah, one for me recently was one that I reviewed, Dawn of the Dead, George A. Romero, Dawn of the Dead. Never liked it. You know, I'd seen it a couple of times when I was like a teenager, and I just did not care for it. I watched it again for my review, and I was like, that's actually a pretty good movie. That I actually had a lot of fun with it and really enjoyed it. So maybe I just needed that time to grow as a movie reviewer, whatever. I don't know, but yeah, that's one recently that I've definitely flipped on.
Star Wars Episode 4: A New Hope. Okay.
Mhm.
So a friend of mine, Matt, I'd seen Star Wars a lot as a kid, but it was one of them movies. It was just like always on around Christmas.
Yeah,
Like any one of those first three was just
right.
on around Christmas. I didn't know them well enough to tell you what bits were from which film. It
Right.
all just kind of blurred
Yeah,
into
yeah,
one. So I wasn't a fan in that sense. So the first time I watched episode 4, um, just as right, I know what I'm watching here, and I'm going to engage with it,
yeah.
and know exactly what it is I'm watching. I watched it with a friend of mine. We were like 14 years old, and I absolutely loved it. Just yeah, it was just a cracking adventure story. I watched it, but that's one where over the years
Came around.
I just I care less and less about it. And now if I watch it, and I've watched it a couple of times in recent years for various things, whether it's
Yeah,
reviews or ranking Star Wars or the 31 and 31s we did,
right.
and like just watching it is actually not so much Empire. I still think that Empire holds up, but that first Star Wars film, I find it a
Yeah,
chore to get through, man. I find it a
yeah.
chore.
And it's crazy because I'm a just a huge Star Wars fan. Always have been since I was a kid. But I'm the same way, man. Like Empire is one of my favorite movies of all time. Love Empire. Return of the Jedi. I think the last act is super emotional, has a lot of heart to it. Really good. But that first Star Wars, New Hope, I've never been that big on it. I mean, it's got a mad following.
Yeah.
Uh, but for me, I'm like, it's got a lot of issues for me. It's pretty boring. A number of times, like I get drawn out. You don't even get introduced to your protagonist till 15 minutes into the movie. You get hardly any like development or actual real story going on that's unfolding. It's just there's a lot of issues with that first one, but uh, as collectively as a whole, I mean, I'm a Star Wars nut. But I know another one for you though, a movie that that has come down over time for you was the original Justice League.
Oh,
Is that right on that?
please. Duh.
I had to bring it up. I love ribbing Bryan whenever I get a chance.
Oh
I like
man,
Hey, I have to do that. I couldn't bring him on for the
it's
podcast.
it's bizarre, man. It's just like, look, I can't deny the reaction I had,
Yeah,
and and those emotions were real.
yeah,
So
yeah.
you feel what you feel at the time that you feel it, and
Right.
it's just I sat there, I'd waited for Justice League for ages, and
Mhm.
I knew a lot of troubles had gone on behind the scenes and that, but at this point, nobody had heard about all the crap that had gone on with Joss Whedon.
Right.
As far as anyone was concerned, he was still pretty much a golden boy. And
Mhm.
I thought if anybody's going to take over, and
Right.
that's in pretty safe hands, as the guy who did Avengers. He knows
Yeah.
what he's doing. Um, so I went in, and I can't escape the fact that I enjoyed it
Yeah.
enough that I came straight out of it and went into the next showing
Wow.
and enjoyed it just as much again.
Mhm.
So that first day when I saw it twice, I
Yeah.
loved it. Absolutely
Yeah.
loved it. It was just fast paced. The gags worked for me.
Yeah.
This, that, and the other. Um, but then it's just one of them where it's like, the more you watch it, the more you see the cracks,
Right.
and the gags just really don't hold up.
And then when you get the
and
proper version by Snyder, you're like,
I mean that was really the final bullet in its head. You see the Snyder's vision for it. I hate using that word because it sounds so pretentious, but you see the vision he had, and you're like, oh,
yeah, it's cringe, man.
It just you see what Whedon did to that. I mean, this scene. I mean, he literally reshot like 75% of what ends up in that movie. And it's just so cringe because you realise how much of it is there literally to be humorous, literally to lighten the mood, and you know, and it pains me to say that there's a scene in there with Batman where he takes down a crook on a rooftop and then has a little scuffle with a parademon. Like, this is Batman, yo. This is right up my street. But now I look at it and he's so cringe because you can tell that it's just been haphazardly put together and written on the fly. It's like, how do we introduce this plot element as quickly as possible using exposition? Because that's what it is, basically. We get this information about parademons, and it all comes from this horrible exposition in which a crook is asking questions of Batman, and then Batman's answering them. It's like, what? What?
Yeah.
So it's just, again, now, like, when I mean, I won't watch it now, to be honest, but certainly the last time I watched that the Whedon Justice League, I sat there in such a state of cringe all the way through that I couldn't believe that I'd ever loved that film as much as I did when I first saw it.
I can't be too hard on you, man, because I saw it in theaters and I liked it. If I'm confessing, I liked it. But I didn't love it, but I liked it. I thought it was solid, but it was still missing a few things. And then I think it was maybe on the second or third time I saw it, I was like, this isn't really as good as I remember it being in theaters. Hopefully we'll get Snyder's version someday. And then when that one came out and I saw it, I was like, this is ball game on the Whedon version, man. So but I like it. And for me, like, if I had to still watch it, I could still get through it because it still has, for me, my favorite version of Batman on screen, which is Affleck's Batman. He's not my favorite Bruce Wayne, but he's my favorite Batman. And because I love his version of Batman, the look and everything, I could still force myself to get through it. But now it's just like, if I want to watch Justice League, it's going to be Snyder every time. So,
I literally, I binned my Joss Whedon copy of that because I know I'm never going to watch it again. I'm just not. No chance. No. But the only thing with the Snyder Cut I would change if I could, and it's not because I don't like it, but it's that scene that he shot at the end with the Joker.
That last segment. Yeah.
That film should end when Clark Kent rips open his thing. Boom. That ends that trilogy quite nicely. I think that was Snyder being a little bit presumptive, thinking, this is going to do so well that they can't help but greenlight the sequels I've got planned. And as a result, we're left with this scene that it's like dangling a carrot under us, and we're never going to see it. So I would rather have never have seen it because of that reason. Like, say what you want about Jared Leto's Joker in Suicide Squad. That's the result of David Ayer doing whatever David Ayer is doing with Jared Leto. But I think the version we get at the end of Snyder's is a much better glimpse, I think, of what Leto could have done with that character. I think some people are still a bit sniffy about it, but I think they've already got the knives out for Leto by that point. If we didn't have the Suicide Squad version of Leto's Joker, and
Yeah.
all we had was that bit we get at the end of the Snyder Cut, I think people would be much more favourable
Oh, for
towards
sure.
Leto as the Joker. So in that regard, I love everything that's going on in that scene. I love what
Yeah.
Leto's doing with the Joker in that scene. But for the sake of, the promises it gave us that are never going to be delivered on, I wish we'd have ended on the chest thing, and that's it. Done.
Right. Or if you have to put it in, maybe you could even put it in the beginning and then go, so you open with it, and then after it you go into okay, this is now the present, this is what could lead to getting to this spot. That way when the movie ends, you're still ending with the Superman logo, but you also know how the film started, so it's like, okay, I kind of know where they're going to end up here. That way you have it in, but you're also not leaving the audience on a kind of a down note. But I'm with you. I prefer just not really have it, just end with the Superman thing. But if you have to put it in, and when I go back to it next time, I'm actually going to watch that part first and then go back and watch the other 5 or 6 chapters. But what about genre? Do you have a favorite genre of film? My channel's been pretty much horror. People know me and know I love horror. It's been my favorite genre for years. But do you have a favorite genre, or do you kind of love all genre equal?
I've always said that I love all genres. I think you can find a good movie in any genre.
Sure.
It's not the most manly thing to say, the period drama, but you look at what Scorsese does with Age of Innocence. That's a great film, man.
Oh, yeah.
Look at what Ang Lee did with Sense and Sensibility. It's a great film. So just to show that, I think there are great films in any genre, but I would say I gravitate towards sci-fi. Like, if you look at my top 20 movies of all time, it's mostly taken up with sci-fi. Like, Interstellar's in there, Inception's in there, Blade Runner 2049 is in there, Terminator 2 is in there, Aliens is in there. So very much my top 20 is dominated mostly by sci-fi, and even The Dark Knight, you could argue, has a sci-fi element in regard. If you look at what Batman does with the mobile phones at the end, it's like that's a discussion on where our capabilities with modern technology are going. It's quite, it's not so far out there that it's unbelievable. It feels like it could be a very feasible idea given how modern technology is heading, and that's really what science fiction does. Is it looks at advancements in technology and how it's going to shape our world, how it's going to shape where humanity's place is in the world. So yes, even my favorite movie of all time has a tinge of sci-fi about it. But yeah.
Cool. What do you think it is about movies that, and this is kind of a loaded question, but what do you think it is about movies that people love? Because movies seem to be kind of a universal language. You could go to any country, any nation, any people group, and you're going to find someone that loves movies. You're going to find some movie nut. Everyone loves movies. Everyone watches movies. What do you think it is about film that people love?
It's story. It looks like story is the oldest art form. We've been doing it since man was writing on cave walls. It's how we pass on what we know. It's how we share our experiences. Before film, people read novels. People still read novels. But now you can put a novel in a 2-hour movie and then you're done. You can watch several 2-hour movies in the time it would take you to read one novel. So I just think that, and I feel like a movie is more. I know people are going to get offended when I say this because no, the books are always better than the film. But a movie is much more immersive to me personally because of all of the other tricks it has at its disposal. but that, and that's not to say that it's done away with books, because it hasn't. But I just think that stories are the oldest art form. We need them. Humanity cannot survive without them, because it's how we teach, it's how we learn.
Right.
If you look at what I would say is the most famous person in history, is Jesus Christ. How did he teach? He told stories. And why was the telling of stories from Jesus so effective? Well, if I stand on a pulpit and tell you this is how you're gonna, this is what you got to do, then you shut down. You listen. You don't listen. It's like, don't tell me what to do. Thank you very much. Right. If I tell you a story where everything I want to talk about is in that story, then you've got to get to the meaning yourself. If it's done right and it's not a preachy slam you over the head story, because that's when people switch off from movies, when they feel like they're being preached to. But if you tell a multi-layered story that gets all your points across in a subtle way, where people have got to dig deep to get them, or read under the surface to understand what it is you're saying, then they feel like they've earned it. They feel like they've learned something and had to do the work in order to learn that thing, so they can they can then take ownership of it. And I think that's why people like you and me love movies. We like to look at them. We like to ask, what are they saying to us? And when a film does speak to us, we feel a sense of ownership of that. Right. I think, it's like a lot of the themes in Magnolia that jump out to me, that mean something to me. They're what make me love that film so much. Because that film has spoken directly to me. It's spoken to my soul. And it's told me things that I already believe, but it's cemented them in some way. It's kind of, it's augmented my reality, so to speak. Yeah. It's and it's just, and I just, that's what film does. It's just, it speaks to us, it teaches us, it shapes our view of the world. In the same way that books have done, that radio plays have done, that people sitting around campfires telling stories has done.
Right. Yeah, and for me, it's also, and I'm sure you could probably relate to this too. It's a way of escapism. Like, it's a way to just kind of, for 2 hours, let go of everything else that's going on in your life and be able to just kind of immerse yourself in this story with characters, with action, or with story or whatever. And it lets you be able to get away from everything else around you going on and just enjoy this immersive experience in this story. And that's another reason that I've loved film, because for me, at darker times in my life, I've been able to throw on a movie and forget about whatever it was that was haunting me, and just be able to immerse myself in that story with those characters or whatever. So yeah, it's story, it's the experience that you have. It can ignite you, like there's some motive, like Rocky for me is a great movie. When I watch Rocky, man, I feel like, man, I want to go out and be a better version of myself. I want to shoot my shot. I want to go out and put myself in the ring, metaphorically, and take my shot. And if I lose, at least I go the distance. At least I'm going. I'm putting myself out there. So you get motivation from film, from stories. You feel certain things that can help change your lifestyle on certain things. So I think it's just that universal language everyone can relate to. And like you said, it's the history of storytelling, and that everyone, and I think also it allows people to create in their minds, like fill in the blanks themselves with a story and use their imagination to create these things. So I know that was kind of a multi-layered question, but what about, I know we've kind of talked briefly on directors. I know you personally, and I know who your favorite director is, but for people out there, who is your favorite director, or do you have like maybe a Mount Rushmore of like these 3 or 4 or 5 directors are, in my opinion, like the best of the best?
Yeah. So obviously Nolan.
Mm,
Nolan's my number one. As far as I'm concerned, he's not made a bad film, not a single bad film amongst his CV. If I made a Mount Rushmore like a couple of years ago, Villeneuve was threatening to
mm,
come in to it, but there was always that kind of like, oh, it's not made quite enough yet for me to
right.
fully go there. But after Dune Part 1 and 2, and after recently seeing Polytechnic, I'm just like, you know what? Yeah, Villeneuve is on there. So I think Spielberg would have to be on there simply because, like, the influence he's had
Yes.
on cinema,
Yeah.
like
The impact
like
and the
yeah,
influence.
like I don't have as many 5-star films of Spielberg, like say, as I do with Nolan, but when I look at the undeniable impact he's had on
Yeah.
cinema as a whole, and how people ape what he does,
Yeah.
and just the level of success that he's had, there's a reason for that. Just yeah, he'd have to be on there, even
Mm,
though there's like if a Spielberg film came out tomorrow, and let's say I'm trying to think of who wouldn't quite make the list, right? So David Fincher, right? He's one
mm.
of them who's like, oh, he's
Right on the edge.
this close to getting on Rushmore, okay, this close.
Yeah.
Now Spielberg is on my Mount Rushmore, but if a Spielberg film came out tomorrow and a David Fincher film came out tomorrow at the cinema, I
Yeah.
would go and see the Fincher film first.
Gotcha.
So you see how that kind of makes sense, but doesn't make
Yeah.
sense. It's going back to that whole idea of favorite and best. If we're talking about, I just think Spielberg has to be on there simply because of the legacy he has, what he's given to cinema, how other filmmakers have kind of come out from under his shadow. So yeah, Spielberg, Nolan, Villeneuve, and that last one, man, that's tricky.
Tarantino,
Really
maybe?
tricky. Tarantino's close. Tarantino's
Yeah.
really close, but I think I might have to go with James Cameron.
James Cameron. Gotcha.
Yeah, might have
Gotcha.
to go with James Cameron. It's really tricky because there's a whole slew of people that certainly are contenders there, like Ridley Scott. So
Oh, yeah.
Ridley Scott for me is a bit like Spielberg because he's been around for so long. He's made
Right.
so many movies. Like the dude just never stops working.
Right.
He's always got his next film lined up when he's halfway through the one he's making. And I think that is partially to blame for why not all of his films are
Mhm.
up there. But when he's on form,
Oh, yeah.
when Ridley Scott is on form,
Yep.
he's hard to touch. He is up there with Spielberg and Nolan and the like when he's putting out his best work.
Right.
I think the only reason he doesn't get Mount Rushmore status is because he does kind of churn them out, so to speak. It means he's got quite a few duds littered in amongst
Right.
the crowd. But for me, Cameron, a little bit like Kubrick, and I know a lot of people are going to just laugh their asses off when
You're
I
a big
compare it to
Kubrick guy.
Kubrick, but I am a big Kubrick guy. Kubrick
Yeah.
is another one who's like this close, but I couldn't, in all good conscience, put Nolan and Kubrick on Mount Rushmore
Mhm.
because the two of them are so similar in what they do. And I know
Right.
for that reason, a lot of people will say, well, then you've got to go with Kubrick because Nolan's just a pale imitation. And I'm like,
Yeah.
no, personally, I think Nolan takes what Kubrick did and puts heart into it. And for me,
Yeah.
that's, I go into a movie, I want to feel something.
Right.
And Kubrick's films don't always do that for me. They They're very intellectual. They get my
Yeah.
head spinning in various ways. But Nolan does that, but he also makes me feel something emotional. So that's why I kind of have to leave Kubrick off and put Nolan on. So, yeah, like Cameron, the reason I compare Cameron to Kubrick is because he takes so damn long to make a film that, there's gaps. The gaps of years between his movies is so long. And yet every time he puts something out, like the amount of times he's had a film that is like, people are just second guessing and saying, this is going to bomb, man. He's taking so long. It's failing. There's all kinds of stuff going on behind the scenes. It's just, it's not going to work. It's just, and then every single time he comes out and annihilates the box office, but not just annihilates the box office, makes a film that, in my opinion, I know not everyone agrees, but in my opinion, is worthy of annihilating the box office. Like I know there are a lot of naysayers of Avatar, but I love those movies, man. I really love them. But even if you push the Avatar movies aside, Terminator, Aliens, Terminator 2, even The Abyss is pretty good. True Lies, such a great action movie. So the guy. The guy's got it. I don't care what some of the naysayers say. So, So, calling it right now at this moment. I go Nolan, Villeneuve, Spielberg, and Cameron.
Wow. Dude, I don't know if I could do a Mount Rushmore of directors, man. It's so hard because there's so many, like Snyder would be way up there for me. I love so many of Snyder's films. I thought you were gonna go. I thought you might go with Paul Thomas Anderson because I know you love Magnolia. There Will Be Blood. I mean, he's got some bangers. But
Magnolia and There Will Be Blood are two of the greatest movies ever made. Both of them, I think, were in my top 20. I know Magnolia is. I think There Will Be Blood, I think, just cracked my top 20 maybe. But certainly, like he is again. He's in my top 10. If I do a top 10 directors, he's on there. All the ones I've just mentioned, Tarantino, Kubrick, Ridley Scott, David Fincher. They make up my top 10 along with those four.
Gotcha. Yeah. What about actors/actresses for the sensitive people out there? Do you have like gotta throw it out. Do you have like this one's really hard for me. Do you have like a favorite actor, or like two or three? Do you have like a Mount Rushmore of actors, or one particular?
So Philip Seymour Hoffman is my favorite all-time actor. And just the reason for that is like, I mean, it sounds pretty obvious to say, but it's got to be about range. Like, I love Schwarzenegger as much as the next guy. He's not an actor. He's a star. He's someone you tailor a film for. You know what he can do. That's his shtick. That's what he does. And you tailor a film for him. Yeah. And Philip Seymour Hoffman, he is just someone like, look, we've got a movie. Have at it. And he can do it.
He's a chameleon.
He's an absolute, he was an absolute chameleon. He can be the weakest, most feeble guy in the room, and then he can be the most scariest. Do not mess with that guy in the room. You look at him in Mission Impossible 3, and in Punch Drunk Love, and The Master to a certain degree. You look at what he's doing in them movies, like that's a guy I don't want to mess with,
right?
At all. And then on the flip side of that, you look at him in Boogie Nights. You look at his gentle nature in Magnolia, and it's like those characters could not be further apart. And it's yet he nails them. And then he gets everything in between. He can do comedy. He's been in comedies where he's been the funniest thing in them. He's done like really great dramas like Charlie Wilson's War, where he takes Aaron Sorkin's dialogue and he just stands out. He's the best thing in that film. It's a great film with Tom Hanks.
you
but
know?
yeah, Almost Famous. Yeah, like
Yeah.
tiny
Yeah.
role, and yet he
Thank you.
sticks out. Yeah, really fast. So yeah, for me, my favorite was all like from like since the early noughties.
Yeah.
He kind of became. I got to a point where I was just like, you know what, I can't
Yeah.
deny Hoffman because it's just everything I watch this guy in, he
Yeah.
just crushes it.
I know for actresses, it's Amy Adams.
Amy Adams, yeah,
Amy Adams
Amy Adams,
fan. Those are
yeah,
two great choices.
yeah,
For me, I think like uh, if you ask me, this kind of goes back to like best and favorite type of thing. Like if
yeah,
you ask
yeah,
me who my favorite actor is, I'm probably gonna go with like a Christian Bale.
yeah,
Just because Bale's been in so many movies that I love. I love watching him and everything that he does. He just brings such intensity, such believability to everything that he does. But if you ask me like who's the best actor of all time, I'm gonna say Daniel Day-Lewis. To me,
yeah.
Daniel Day is like if you're an inspiring actor and you want to learn from the best, watch Daniel Day-Lewis's filmography, everything that he's doing. He's the guy to learn from. You know, three leading actor, Oscars. To me, Daniel Day is just he's the guy.
He's my second choice. So
Oh
like
yeah,
the only thing for me that stops Daniel Day Lewis taking that number one spot is again that output thing.
right,
He's like Philip Seymour Hoffman kind of churned out performances. I don't say that in a derogatory sense, but it's like he's working all the time,
yeah,
and yet he never let the fact that he was working all the time diminish his
right,
performance. Like he might have been in films that weren't quite as good as other things he's done, but it was
yeah,
never because of him. He
right.
was always great in it.
All on point.
And I feel like Daniel Day Lewis kind of has no excuse to
Mhm.
deliver something bad because he spends 3 years on the damn thing.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like,
He
it's,
definitely took his time with movies,
yeah.
man.
So it's like, if he doesn't put out a good performance, then like someone needs to have words like, dude, it's
Yeah.
been 3 years since your last movie, and then what's your excuse? Where it's like Hoffman's putting out 3 films a year, and
Right.
everyone is amazing performance. So
Right.
that's for me is the reason Hoffman takes that number one spot. But
That's a
if
good point.
yeah, if you ask me what is the single greatest performance of all time,
Mhm.
I'm going with Day Lewis in There Will Be Blood.
That's a movie that it's just like I don't know. I mean, there's maybe just one or two other performances I can think of where I'm literally so invested in everything that Daniel Day-Lewis is doing. I can't take my eye, I can't look
Yeah.
away. Like I am completely, I remember the first time I watched the movie, there was at one point, I think it was maybe in the scene at the campfire where he's talking. I don't think it was with Dano. No, it's not with Paul Dano. I forget who it's with, but like I found myself literally like leaning in like this because I was just like so enthralled with everything he's saying and doing. I was just so captivated. But it's Daniel Day Lewis as far as like single performance in a movie that just completely captivated me. Daniel Day and There Will Be
Heath
Blood,
Led,
Heath
yeah,
Ledger
Heath
as the
Ledger,
Joker,
yeah,
and for me, uh, Anthony Hopkins in Silence of the Lambs as Hannibal Lecter. Like I just everything that those guys, each of those guys did in those movies, I'm just completely tuned in. I mean,
yeah,
I could hear a train go by and I wouldn't be distracted by it. Like I'm just so
yeah,
immersed in what they're doing. But yeah, that's a great call on Daniel Day. There Will Be Blood, man.
yeah. I
Such
think
a great.
Al Pacino in The Godfather as well is
Oh
really
yeah,
good.
yeah.
Just
Especially
I'd say especially part one actually. Um, I prefer part one over part two. I
but
I think part one is a better film. I think the performance is better. I think the change for the character is much wider.
that's true. Yeah.
Like the best scene in any of the Godfather films is that scene in the cafe when he knows the gun is in the bathroom.
Yes.
And
Yep.
he's in there to kill the guy, and he knows he's got to go in,
Yep.
get the gun, and kill him. And just that moment when he's weighing it all up, and it's all in his eyes, it's all in his face. He's looking around, and he knows that this moment right now,
Right.
everything that is going to come after is going to change based on the decision he makes right now, and just what's going on behind the eyes with Pacino in that scene is just phenomenal. Another one as well, and this is probably, I would say, the most underrated performer of all time, is Christopher Walken.
Good call.
When you look at you look at The Deer Hunter, Christopher Walken, I'm sorry for people who disagree, but Christopher Walken blows Robert De Niro off the screen in Deer Hunter. Okay,
he does.
The scenes between them when they're doing the Russian roulette, it's Walken that I'm watching. It's Walken that's got me zoned in on the screen. You look at what Walken's doing in that, and even some like Catch Me If You Can as well. I don't think he gets anywhere near enough credit for that film. Like, there's so many subtle little things Walken's doing in Catch Me If You Can that, like, that the character he's playing is kind of a broken man in many ways, and it's just like, again, it's just subtle things he does with his body language and with his eyes that tell you that underneath there's so much more going on. But man, I could go on now for ages. Colin Farrell. So Colin Farrell's been one of my favourites since In Bruges. I think his performance in Bruges, again, doesn't get enough credit because it's kind of a dark comedy film. I think it almost goes overlooked because people laugh and then, they move on. But there's so much of a dark undercurrent with his character. He's done the most heinous of things that one could do. He's killed a child. Now it's accidental, but the weight of guilt that is on him, I think Farrell just
still need to see that
nails it. There's the scene where you can see that he wants to do himself in, and it's just everything he's doing, like his face, what's going on behind. Again, it's always like what's going on behind the eyes. It's like, can an actor convey what's in there without speaking it out? And it's just and he does. Like you sit there and you watch that, and you know exactly what he's thinking. Exactly what he's thinking, without anyone discussing it, without anyone saying, "Oh, I'm really like feeling this," And it's just Pacino does it in Godfather in that scene. Farrell does it in Bruges. I
think Pacino also. There's a scene in Godfather Part 2 that also kind of does that for me, and it's when his wife tells him about the baby, tells him about the abortion. And you see Pacino hanging onto the chair. It just, his reaction in that scene doesn't say anything, but it's his eyes and what he does with his face as he's hearing this and processing it. It's just like you can read everything. It's like it's almost a transformation of feeling from Pacino to you. You're just like, dude. Yeah, this guy, he's about to go off because to that family, the children is more important than your spouse to them, And so when she comes in and tells him, I aborted it, it's just like his reaction to that, man, was just so good. He's also, I think, really good in Scent of a Woman. I
Mm.
think people bring up Godfather, Scarface, but him and Sin of a Woman, man, playing a blind person already is difficult,
Oh.
but so believable, and then also the emotion that he conveys while playing a blind man is also
Yeah.
just, I mean, he's incredible in that movie.
Scent of a Woman's actually one of my favourite films, and it gets a bit of a bad rap because of the whole hoo-ah kind of thing.
Right, right,
And it's
yeah,
just, but it's like, look, it was a bold choice and he got him an
yeah,
Oscar, but it's like,
yeah,
it's just, I get
right,
that it's not as subtle as some of his other roles, but
right,
it's a role that doesn't call for subtlety.
right.
This is a guy who's like, he's lost all inhibitions because
Yeah,
he's blind. He don't give a crap no more. He's going to say whatever's in his head. He's going to let it pour out. He's not going to apologize for it. He's loud.
yeah,
He's obnoxious. And that's the character as written on the page. Pacino just plays that. So people who get all, take the mick because of the whole hoo-ah thing, it's just like, no,
right.
to me, that was a
That
right
was
choice
amazing.
to make. As an actor, he made that choice, and it's like, and it made it memorable. So yeah.
It's also a sign of a great actor knowing when to go large like that,
Mm,
and but also knowing when to do to I don't want to say underdo it, but
yeah,
knowing when to just bring subtlety
yeah,
to a character, not go over the
yeah.
top. But he's one
Mm,
that I Heat also like in
yeah.
Heat there are moments where he goes large,
Yeah, yeah.
but there's
But it
also
calls for
moments.
it. It calls
Yes,
for it. Yeah,
yes, but also in that same movie, moments of subtlety
yeah,
where you get a lot of the feeling that he's thinking and feeling. The dinner table with De Niro, there's a lot going on in Pacino at that time, but he doesn't go large. He just kind of he has that dialogue with De Niro, but you can tell he's thinking and feeling a lot in
yeah,
that scene that he's kind of reeling in, and just because he knows he can't go large because De Niro's this powerful guy, and if he
mm,
goes large, it could have ramifications. So he
yeah, yeah,
he pulls back, but he still conveys the emotion and the feeling what he has in,
yeah.
in that moment. So um,
Another one I just want to bring up as well is Benicio del Toro.
oh
Um,
yeah, yeah,
if
he's another one.
I don't know if you've seen Way of the Gun.
I haven't seen that one. No.
So there's a scene in Way of the Gun where they're locked in this room, or they're kind of hiding out in this room, and they know there's a load of people coming with guns, about to descend on him, and Benicio del Toro is weighing everything up, and there's just this. They've got this girl, and it's like, do they hand her over? If they do, Lord knows what's going to happen to her.
Mm.
So there's a lot of stuff going on, and it's like, so he's just sitting there, the corner of this room, and he's just weighing everything up, and this it just goes on for about like 40, 50 seconds, which doesn't sound like a lot, but in film, that's a long
Right.
time. It's a long
Yeah.
time to just watch an actor essentially doing nothing. But
Right.
he's not just doing nothing. Like literally, it's one of them scenes where as you're watching him, you're just glued.
Yeah.
Like you're like, what's this guy gonna do? What's he gonna? And you can see his eyes. You're looking at his eyes, and you're like, what's he thinking? Where's he
Yeah.
going? He's like, and all the options he's weighing up, and it's just,
Right.
yeah, like Benicio del Toro is another one who's like, he's not quite had the career that a lot of the other actors have had.
Yeah.
A lot of his stuff's been more low key, but like you look at him in Usual Suspects, the role he has in Usual Suspects, it's a nothing part.
Right. Right.
There's nothing there on
Very-
the page, but he does stuff with his body language that just makes this nothing character memorable. And yeah, so
Yeah.
he's put in some really great performances.
A guy that's gone up way high on my list recently is Robert Pattinson.
Mm,
Because I think I saw like the first two Twilight movies or whatever, but I never really even thought of him as the Twilight guy because I never really
yeah,
cared about those movies. I was never
yeah,
into them. But I saw him in Good Times. I think it was, yeah, Good Times. I think it's what it's
mm,
called. And I was like, dude, this guy can act.
yeah.
And then I saw him in another one that he did after that. Get what it was. And then Tenet, I saw him in Tenet. Loved him in Tenet, and then obviously in the Batman, I was just like, yeah, this guy, he's got serious talent. So he's one that's definitely gone up high for me
Yeah.
recently.
He was in a film called the Lost City of Dead.
I think that may have been
Yeah,
the one I was thinking about.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah, really good.
When I watched him in that, I thought, oh, hang on,
Yeah,
he's more than Twilight Boy. And
right.
then and then in Tenet, I really liked what he did in Tenet.
He
Like
was great.
the, the chemistry he brought to with David Washington and just
Right.
like who his character is and that just yeah.
He's gone up high for me. Well, Bryan, before we close out, man, we're about halfway through 2024. Do you have a favorite movie that you've seen this year, and then a movie that you're most looking forward to that's still yet to come out this year?
So Dune Part Two is my favorite film so far this year. I
Okay.
would be very surprised if that gets knocked off the
Mm,
number one spot for this year because part one of Dune was my favorite film of
mm,
when was that 2022.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
big time.
And I think part two is better. So
Mm,
the chances that's getting knocked off my number one spot is
yeah.
very slim. But yes, I think it's been out over here, but I very limited release. Maybe it's not. I don't know. But I do really want to see the first part of that Kevin Costner Western.
Oh, right. What's it called? I've seen like trailers or like clips of it, but
Yeah. Like I love Dances with Wolves. Absolutely love that film. I love Open Range. Open
yeah,
Range is just incredible. I just think Costner is an expert on that world. It's something that's very close to him. It's something he has a deep understanding of and an interest in.
right.
So whenever he's willing to go back and revisit, the
Yeah,
West, and I'm there. So to find out that he had this, is it 4 films planned altogether?
oh,
Whether they'll actually make them all now, because I think that this one's not done so well.
yeah,
But yeah, anytime he's going to do a Western, I'm like, yeah, what, eight,
yeah,
12 hours worth of Western?
yeah.
Sign me up.
I'm going
I'm
for
a,
it.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I do want to see that. There's a couple more that just
Joker too.
Romulus, Alien Romulus, and Joker 2.
Yeah,
So yeah, I think Joker Folie à Deux is my even more than Dune. It was probably my most anticipated of the year.
yeah,
If there is a film that stands a chance of knocking Dune Part 2 off, it is Joker Part 2 because Joker was my favorite film of 2019. So
yes,
you've literally got a sequel to my favorite film of 2019 and
yeah,
a sequel to my favorite film of 2022 are
yeah,
literally battling it out this year, I think, for supremacy. Add to that a new film in one of my favorite franchises of all time, which is Alien Romulus. Then yeah, we're still looking pretty hot for the rest of this year. Yeah.
um, yeah. Joe, I was at the theater the other day watching Deadpool and Wolverine, and they showed the trailer for Joker 2, and I'm just like, yeah, bring it on, man. I'm so ready for that one.
Yeah.
Love the first one. So that for me, that's definitely the one I'm most looking forward to for this year. But Bryan, before we close out, man, is there anything else that you got coming up for the viewers watching? Anything that they can kind of be looking forward to? Do you have any plans? Like what's kind of coming for you here in the near future?
So recently I went through for the first time the entire Buffy the Vampire Slayer 7 seasons.
Wow.
So today I recorded a ranking video for that. So I've ranked
Okay.
every season of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. be warned, anyone listening, if you're a Buffy fan, there may be some things I say in it that may
controversial.
I'm not scared of rubbing people the wrong way, but hey, yeah, it's my thought.
Trust me, say my word for that. Bryan is not afraid of doing that.
There's some stuff in I overall I say I liked Buffy, but there's a lot about that show that I don't, that rubs me the wrong way in many ways. But yeah, it's a good show. It's well made. It has some real standout episodes. One episode in particular is one of the best hours of television I've ever seen.
Wow.
But then you've got a lot of it where I'm like,
yeah,
okay, it's not kind of sitting well with me here. But yeah, so that'll be an interesting video. I'd love to see the reaction to that. And I am doing a collaboration with Jason Nike from Backtrack Cinema, where we're both doing our top 100 movies of the 90s. So
oh wow, okay.
I filmed that video. It's going to take a lot of editing, so so I mean, both of those videos are going to take a lot of editing, and they're both going to be like hour-long video. Well, the top 100, that's going to be like a 2-hour video. The Buffy one's probably going to be like an hour long. So they're big videos, which means I'm not putting out a lot of content at the moment because
working on those.
Yeah. I mean, I've recently stated as well to, I've got some patrons and some members, and I put out a message recently to them that actually the content I put out from now on is going to be less, but hopefully bigger and better. So less short reviews, more big kind of epic countdown type videos and stuff. Things that require more work, but maybe a more rewarding watch.
I love that because I love watching Bryan's channel. I watch your stuff all the time. So a lot of Bryan, I'm all for. So the bigger the better, man. I love it. Bryan, thanks for being here, man. Thanks for doing this. Coming on the channel. You're always welcome. I think one of my subscribers, I think maybe Damien, was really wanting us to do something again. So enjoyed it, man. Thanks for coming on. Always a pleasure to have you.
Always a pleasure to be here, mate.
Sweet. All right.
See you in the Facebook chat.
Yes, indeed. Bryan always ribbing. He's, he denies that he's a Halloween fan, but we know that.
Hey, I do not deny that I'm a Halloween fan. I am a Halloween fan. I like that original film very much. Very much. It's just not 5-star film itself.
Yeah. That's Bryan's little jab that he had to throw.
It's an upper tier 4-star film. So
I gotcha. All right, guys, we're gonna wrap it up. Thank you guys for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. See you next time. Until then, kick it and rock on.